Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining SDG Pavilion at UNFCCC COP28 live from Dubai. Thank you very much for joining. My name is Minoru Takada. I'm the UN Energy Secretary at the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs. Today is so-called Energy Day at COP28, and we talk about, obviously, our favorite topic called energy. Now, in the context of climate discussion, you have been hearing a lot about energy transitions. But step back a little bit. We should look at where we are in the world. You have established collectively what we call Sustainable Development Goals. Number 7 is Goal on Energy, which has 3 targets. 1, ensuring everybody have access to modern, reliable, sustainable energy solutions. So that's called Universal Energy Access Agenda by 2030. Are we there yet? Unfortunately not. Electricity, we have about 700 million people who do not have access to electricity in the world. When it comes to clean cooking solutions, over 2 billion people still do not have access to clean cooking solutions. That's a big problem. We have to solve this problem by 2030. Are we up for that challenge? This is what we'll be discussing as part of the discussion. Second, renewable energy. This is a growing area. Then we have to double, triple renewable energy, and this is one thing that is part of the SDG 7 framework. And thirdly, very importantly, doubling the rate of improvement in energy efficiency. No matter how much we add, unless we use it effectively, efficiently, we will not be able to maximize our resources for the benefit of the people, to leave no one behind, and make things more sustainable. So that's the objective of SDG 7. Now, in New York, we have been working on supporting the acceleration of action toward achievement of all SDGs. This year, we had SDG Summit. Guess what? Only 15% are on track. And when it comes to SDG 7, some goals, targets are doing well, but many things are not sort of doing very well, including energy access agenda. So today, we are going to hear from the leaders from the governments, and as well as my colleagues from the, on the technical background can debate a little bit about how can we accelerate our agenda moving forward. With this introduction, may I now turn to the 2 distinguished speakers to have deliver remarks. First, may I introduce His Excellency Dr. Satya Widya Yudhar, Vice Minister and a member of the National Energy Council of the Republic of Indonesia. Over to you, sir.
Very good afternoon, and thank you very much for inviting me on a very short notice. But I'm happy to be part of this wonderful crowd and discussion about the energy, and particularly, of course, I'm going to report to all of you with the progress that the Indonesia made so far. As you probably know, that Indonesia wants to quit from the middle income trap by 2045. Announcing that 100 years Indonesia independence. A lot of work to be done, of course. We are assume that our economy growth is around 6%, from now on up to 2060. So in order for us to achieve the, belong to the high-income society countries, hopefully, finger crossed. But the energy sectors, of course, become a very critical element. So we also doing the scenario on the energy transition. So simultaneously, we want to achieve become the developed country. But on the other hand, we have to also align with our strategy in achieving the net zero emission by 2060. So Indonesia is living in the fossil fuel economy for so long. As you probably know, we are rich in the gas and also oil resources. And nowadays that we have to switch, particularly on the coal side. But the thing that I like to report to all of you that is easy talk than done, because of the existing facility that we do have, particularly on the coal-based fire plants, been on PPA for another 20 or 25 years. So a lot of initiative coming from the international community, such as the Just Energy Transition Partnership, to help to accelerate the brown assets what I may say that because we have to solve this issue first before we stepping into the implementation of the renewable energy into that system. Indonesia pledged that by 2025 that we are aiming to achieve 23% of the renewables, part of the energy mix. Nowadays, just two more years to go, but we're just only able to achieve around 12%. So that's becomes our homework. But on the other hand, in terms of the energy security, that we have to be able to provide the security of supply for the energy to the people. And the second part of it is the affordability. Yeah, and then the third, of course, everything that should be done in the condition of environmentally friendly. So those three aspects that we are working on in Indonesia, and so far what we have done is quite progressing, in terms of the electricity ratio, that we are able to manage the achievement of around 97.3%. So most of the Indonesians nowadays is they enjoying the electricity, and even though from the demographic standpoint that Indonesia is archipelago country, sometimes the rural islands has not been fully electrified because of the conditions of the location. But now we are aiming to do a lot of works with the subsidy from the government in order to provide electricity to that people, that categorize the and the rural area and also isolated islands, and the bigger scale on the issue of the achieving the net zero emission by 2060. We like to do in both sides. One is we like to decarbonize our fossil fuel because of our existing asset. So it means that we are decreasing the carbon footprint by decarbonizations. Of course, need technology in it, because of carbon capture and utilization storage is one of them. And also, the technology that we can combine between fossil and renewables, such as the co-firing for our coal-based fire plant. So at least with the existing asset, we are able to achieve our NDC as per 2030, that we have to be able to reduce the emission up to 460 million ton by international assistance. But if without international assistance, around 336 million ton by 2060. And this year, I may report to all of you that we are able to achieve the reduction of the emission up to 112 million ton. So still, few works more to go in order to achieve that goals. So in the broader scenario as well, that the way the government of Indonesia managed on the achieving of our energy policy, we cascade down all the energy policy that down from the center to the provincial levels. So we call it the provincial energy policy. So we're monitoring whether their policy is in line with the central government. So all the goals that we are setting up, it has to be complied and has to be followed by the provincial levels up to the governors and district levels. Those are the things that we like to to see it happen, and hopefully all the commitment that we already give it to the UNFCCC through our NDC will be achieved tremendously. So that's probably my short remark that I like to again to convince that we are a developing country with a really progressing spirit in order for us to achieve the global standard. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vice Minister. May I now turn to His Excellency Ambassador Munir Akram, Permanent Representative of Pakistan to the United Nations. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, moderator. The distinguished Vice Minister has spoken about the national efforts of Indonesia, and we in Pakistan are in a slightly different place. We emit only 1% of the world's carbon emissions, but we are one of the most vulnerable countries to climate change. The achievement of SDG 7, in particular the energy transition, will require actions by both the developed countries and assistance to developing countries in making that transition. As far as the developed countries are concerned, I would recommend at least 3 actions. Firstly, we need to double down on the mitigation goals of the industrial countries. These require a minimum of 45% reductions by 2030. These are not on track, although some of our friends say that they are on track. According to figures, that they are not on track. We need to now rely on new technologies that are emerging, in particular carbon capture and reuse technology, more efficient engines with mitigation, and there are new technologies coming out here. I do not think direct air capture looks good, but it's not going to do the trick. We need capture at source of mitigation from fossil fuels as such. Secondly, I think we need accountability. The commitments that have been made for emissions and for other aspects of SDG 7 need to be fulfilled. They cannot just remain promises and on a voluntary basis. There has to be a system of accountability which would penalize non-fulfillment of commitments for carbon reduction and carbon mitigation especially by the industrial countries. And thirdly, I think we need to find some pathways for enabling the pricing of carbon. Until carbon is priced and carbon use becomes more expensive, it is unlikely that there will be a strong enough incentive to decarbonize as such. So these are some things the developed countries should be doing. For the developing countries, it is estimated that we need a transition which will cost about 1.5 trillion per year in terms of installation of renewables, of mitigation of carbon, etc., etc. Last year, we were less than 10% of this figure of investment that is required in the developing countries. So obviously there is a need for a dramatic multiplication of investment into developing countries as such. What are the impediments and how do we do it? It's not only a question of the political will of the industrial countries, there is also a question of A, the policy framework for investment, and B, the projects for investment. As far as the policy framework is concerned, we've got a number of regulatory recommendations coming from various panels, various expert groups, etc. But it's not been centralized. The World Bank uses one, the Asian Bank another, the GCF another. I think we need some kind of a global normative framework which would qualify for finance for the SDG 7, a climate-friendly finance. That regulatory environment has to be set up. And my recommendation for the last 2 years in the UN has been to establish a policy board under the Secretary General in order to bring all the stakeholders together, the private, public sector, governments, donors, the energy players, bring them all together and develop a normative global framework for investment in climate finance. Secondly, the developing countries have to have viable projects to attract investment in the either renewable energy, abatement of carbon, etc., they need viable projects to be developed. So my recommendation is that the nationally determined contributions that the developing countries are supposed to make, these should be translated into projects. It is not sufficient for us to say we will achieve 50% or 60% or 70% unless we have the projects. If we can projectize the NDCs, we will have something concrete to present to the donors or to the investment agencies or to the private sector, that these are the projects we want investment for. And therefore, I think we should establish under the UN a project unit, perhaps under, not DESA, but associated with DESA, a project unit run by professional investors who can help developing countries to develop these projects. The United Nations has got 130 country offices with all kinds of experts, all people sitting there with knowledge of those developing countries. They should help those developing countries translate the NDCs into real projects and be able to present them through this project unit to investors, utilizing the support of the policy board under the UN. So these are some concrete things I think we can do in order to assist the developing countries move towards the fulfillment of SDG 7. But there are also some things that we ought not to do. I think the danger of the carbon protectionism is very real for developing countries. A carbon tax at the border is a pure protectionist effort by the industrial countries concerned, and we must resist and reject it as such. Secondly, technology. What is at stake is the existence of mankind, of humanity. So if you have a technology which can help mitigate carbon, which can help put off the evil day of crossing 1.5 degrees Celsius, we must take hold of it. That technology, if one is developed, whether it's developed in Japan or in Germany or in the United States or in India or China, that technology, once it is invented, there must be pathways to transform it into a global public good with no IP rights and ability to apply that technology wherever it's required in order to achieve our sustainable development goals and our climate goals. So these are some suggestions that I want to put forward.
Ambassador, thank you very much. Thank you very much for, and Vice Minister as well, that we got the very big picture suggestions. I think now we are transitioning to the technical discussions here. My colleagues here, Hompen from UNSCAP, and Monica from Sweden CEDAR, and CEDAR from Energy Network on Energy and Gender. And they are very well-versed experts, both nationally and internationally well-respected. So I think the extremely good panel pick up on very big picture, the suggestions came up from the keynote remarks of the Vice Minister and Ambassador here. So I'd like to go around twice, if it's okay with you. So we obviously are just halfway through the 2030 agenda on SDG 7 situation. Without a doubt, you know very well about it. And of course, we are also looking at, toward net zero. This is sort of where we are discussing here, going into the, 2050 needs to be achieving, but making sure that, that transition is going to be just, inclusive, and prosperity to be sort of shared with everybody. So I think that's a challenge that we need to carry, those things. So some of the big picture sort of suggestions coming from the keynote remarks and reflecting your practical experiences. What do you see that next 3 to 4 or 7 years up to 2030 that we as international community should focus on so that we can actually accelerate SDG 7 moving forward? May I start with Hong Pen?
Thank you, Minoru. Thank you for inviting me to this very important event. I think our keynote speaker, Excellencies, mentioned a number of very concrete recommendations. If you look at SDG 7, we just have 6 years to go. But there are great challenges. I think you mentioned about the global review. Every year we are doing this monitoring and assessment of progress of SDG 7 at the global level. For us, Asia Pacific, we also do the regional review. So one side, we see the progress, but it's not enough. There's a great challenge, as you said, that there are 3 targets. And for energy efficiency for Asia Pacific, we see for last decade, we are still below the global average. So we need to accelerate the reduction of energy intensity. Globally it's like 3%. But for Asia Pacific, we have only 2.8%. So that means we still need to catch up. And for renewable energy, probably Asia Pacific absolute kind of installation of renewable energy for last decade, we are leading the globe kind of progress for renewable energy. But the share of renewable energy in Asia Pacific for last decade still static. So even declining, because Asia Pacific's energy demand is growing up quickly, population, urbanization, that's the main cause. And also the fossil fuels. The share of fossil fuels is going up at the same time. But the renewables, although we installed probably the largest installation of renewables in Asia Pacific, but the share of renewable energy is still declining. So that's a major issue. As you said, how you do this energy transition, especially just energy transition, you really need to pay attention. I think from the policy side, from technology and investment, probably the most important part is policy and the investment. I see the technology, I can see it's readily available in the market. But where the money come from, especially for those developing countries. I think our Vice Minister mentioned about the JETP in Indonesia, JETP in Vietnam. That's only 2 countries. If you think about the large number of developing countries in the world and also in Asia Pacific, lack of money probably is the most kind of a challenging one. But we can't just say depend on the investors from outside of the country. We have to think about how to do it from the country itself. I think one of the things the government can start to think about how you just reduce the subsidies for fossil fuels. All the countries have the subsidies, but how you just I think we cannot say phase out of the subsidies, but we can say reduce the subsidies as much as possible. And then this could be part of the investment from internal. And secondly, public-private partnership. And we know private sector, they have technology, they have the investment. How you just create an enabling environment, I think that's the role of government. And the third one, probably the policy, set up a clear target. I think by end of 2022, we have 84 countries committed for net zero emissions, over 35 located in Asia Pacific. So these countries have a clear target for net zero emissions by 2050 or 2060. That is one of the signal for the private sector, how they just invest in the areas for energy transition. So that I think the policy side, set up a clear target. Secondly, create an enabling environment for private sector to develop. And the third one, I think, regional cooperation among the South-South cooperation among developing countries. I think a lot of potential, especially in Asia Pacific. We have the largest emerging economies like China, India, and Indonesia. Those countries, they have the capacity, to develop by their own, but at the same time, they can also work together with other developing countries and to work together for technology R&D and also for capacity building. I really think that's a potential, we can think about to work together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Monica?
Thank you. It works? Yeah, it works. So my name is Monica Gullberg from the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency, and I've been working with many of your countries. And I would like to extend my thanks for your very nice introduction and your recommendations. I say we would agree with most of them. But when I think about the goals for energy transition and climate goals, I think what we lack is the demand perspective. We have an energy sector that has destroyed the planet, basically, and who is continuing to come with solutions based on their perception of their own affair. But if we really would like to change that and include optimization, efficiency, other types of business models, other types of energy service providers, you'll have to pay more attention to the demand side of the energy, because what we're talking about is the buildings, different kinds of activities, having buildings, of course, commercial or public, the transport sector, and the industries. And all these energy end users can also be part of de-risking the capital for investing in new systems. Today we are talking about energy supply, de-risking energy supply. But if you would like to de-risk, for example, energy services for new customers, and including new customers that didn't have any energy before, or marginalized groups also, you would need to understand what they like. And also the bigger industries like the steel industry and the aluminium industry, they can be part of the solution, providing flexibility into the system. So my recommendation or my take would be to let's pay more attention to the energy demand, and don't be like humble customers, but also be people who care and want to have sustainable energy.
Very well. Thank you. Sira?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Minoru, for having me on the stage. And my remarks are going to be very easy because I think a lot has been said and was very nicely said by our esteemed opening speakers. Minoru, I'd like to speak to this point in my position as the SDG 7 co-facilitator. I co-facilitate a technical advisory group that is convened under UN DESA that supports the technical review of SDG 7 to inform the high-level political forum. This is convened, like I said, by UNDESA, and I'm co-facilitating it together with Hans-Olof Ibrig from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And the SDG 7, we produce policy briefs. We have done this since the first review of SDG 7, and to date, I think this is our 6th edition. In the last edition, we have been very serious about thinking about this, and I think there are four points to bring across. I think the first thing is that we cannot afford to reach SDG 7. The cost of inaction, I think this was put in numbers by the World Bank, Minoru, in their report that was presented at the SDG Summit. I think it was at the range of $8.4 trillion due to inaction of not reaching SDG 7, so we're not going to be able to do that. The Energy Progress Report that is produced by the custodian agencies makes it much more real. We're talking about loss of life of 3.2 every year annually because of lack of access to clean cooking fuels. So the cost of inaction is unacceptable. So if we say we have to achieve it, then our focus has to be on solutions. And so in that respect, 4 solutions is that, one, the clean cooking agenda, that this needs to be, one, a political priority. It needs to be an investment priority, but it really has to be upfront, and we need to we need to prioritize it much more than we have been doing, because we see, again, from the SDG 7 report that we're not making progress on it. Electrification, we have made progress, but like our esteemed speaker from Indonesia said, there's still millions that are not. So the next would be closing the gap for electrification. And that is going to be in a lot of our rural areas. We do know there's a big divide, inequalities between electrification in urban areas that are really outpacing electrification in rural and remote areas. So that would be another. The other is what you said earlier, Minoru, is if we are going to transition, that we need to transition, it needs to be just and inclusive. Just and inclusive means that energy access has to be, we have to accept that there are some of us who, our starting point is no energy, particularly from the continent that I come from Africa. So energy access has to be front and central. But aside from that, just and inclusive means that energy has to be an enabler to achieving other SDGs that are really important for our development agenda. So that's on food security, that's on gender equality, that's on health, that's on education, that energy needs to be seen to be delivering on these. And then just to speak to the point that our esteemed colleague from Pakistan had said about finding an institutional platform where we are not just speaking, our member states and our governments are not just coming together to reflect on the progress that has been made, but also re-energize the commitments at ad hoc meetings. There was an excellent, the high-level energy dialogue in, I think, 2021 that was led by the UN, did an incredible job. But these are, you know, they're just points in time. So I would fully agree, and the SDG 7 Technical Advisory Group also says we need to have sort of a permanent institutional platform within the UN where energy can be brought to the table and can be discussed. The UN is important because it's inclusive. It brings in other stakeholders, civil society groups, private sector, local governments, as we heard from our colleague from Indonesia. So I think that would be the last. The global stocktake that is going to be taking place next year under the presidency of the General Assembly, I feel it's an opportune moment to bring the actions that we have talked about to the table. So we're looking forward to that. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. So I think Sira's point about moving forward next year, General Assembly decided that President of General Assembly will convene a global stocktaking, not on the climate Paris Agreement, but all focused on the SDG 7 implementation. This is sort of part of the ongoing processes, but I think it gives us an opportunity to reflect the last 10 years or so, and looking forward to next couple of years to accelerate and finish off the SDG 7 agenda. And then I agree that we have to bring useful ideas. And here, then, the Ambassador Akram already sort of laid out a few big picture suggestions, right? Whether it is a broader policy framework to guide investments, for example, whether we should be a bit more aggressive in articulating opportunities on the ground in the form of projects or initiative or partnership. JETP, for example, is a good example of partnership on those things. But I think, obviously, the international processes like we do in New York tend to be a bit more process and, the data monitoring oriented. But what I think everybody wants is that intergovernmental processes also deliver on something more the action driving. So looking at sort of next year's global stocktake on SDG 7, the Summit of the Future and beyond, another COP to come, what are the sort of the big picture deliverables that you'd like to see? And then we can debate a little bit. And then, Ambassador, we might come back to you a little bit for your guidance on the further suggestion on these issues after this panel is set. But I think it will be important that we go beyond data, we go beyond the monitoring. We look at sort of what is it that the global community can do, or multi-stakeholders should do, and of course UN system should of course do. And what do we want member states to step up and to be able to sort of enable those things to happen? I think those are the kind of things that we working at the technical level should give a bit more deeper thoughts. They're using those opportunities on that. So may I come back again in this order? Hongpen, over to you.
Thank you, Minoru. So I think the intergovernmental process is one of the important component for this global kind of maybe accelerate the global actions SDG 7. The stocktake is probably one of the ways we can do it. But at the same time, we probably also need to work together closely with the member state. At the regional level in Asia Pacific, actually, I think our member countries already established a kind of intergovernmental process, like including Pakistan, really support the SCAP's work to establish an energy committee. So this is a committee, all the members share their views, share their good practices, and then to forge the collective actions at the regional level for energy transition. One of the tangible outcomes from our intergovernmental process to support the member countries to develop their SDG 7 roadmap. So, all the countries, they have their own national strategies for sustainable energy development. But some of this target is not closely aligned with the SDG 7 up to 2030. Most of the countries probably they work with the, if you look at the 2015, probably only 5 years, but there's no way, kind of long term to align with the SDG 7 to have their national kind of energy strategies. So what we do is we develop a kind of methodology to support the country to analyze about their existing national strategy on sustainable energy and the SDG 7. So what are the gaps and how you address these gaps? And secondly, to also go beyond the 2030, the SDG 7, up to their Paris Agreement commitment, the NDCs. And some of the countries also request to go even beyond the 2030, up to 2050 for net zero emissions. So what's the result we got? We already done 16 countries and subnational SDG 7 roadmaps, including Indonesia, Pakistan, and also Nepal. Those developing countries have this SDG national roadmap, which clearly provide this result if you achieve SDG 7. So how you do from policy side, from technology side, the investment needs. And how, if you achieve your NDCs, so same, and also the net zero emissions. This gives the government to think about when they review their energy strategy, how you just integrate or align with this existing kind of strategy and also the global target. So I think this is one of the examples we are doing through this intergovernmental process, and the mandate was given by the member countries to support the member country to move ahead with SDG 7. I really think the stocktaking will give the opportunity again and to go through this, how when we review the progress, we also find what are the gaps and how we work together to address these gaps.
Thank you. Monica?
Thank you, Minoru, and thank you for this question. I think the UN system should, I think what Pakistan member said is quite constructive about helping the countries to develop projects. But I also think, because, and referring to what I said just recently, I think we also have to support countries to have a structured dialogue with the energy sector and to have a say on what kind of energy that you need, rather than just looking to investing in IPPs and just complementing the system that we have and that we're not happy with fully. I mean, we should utilize the competence, but we should also ask for better solutions. I think the current system does not include cooking, like Sheila mentioned. That's the deficit, and we also have very much need for more transmission lines among countries, and especially in Asia. And I was thinking of, for example, Indonesia with all your islands, and the difficulty you have to shifting to renewable energy because of the land shortage you have in your islands. And this should be taken as an international challenge, and we should be looking into transmission lines also. And I think, so a structured dialogue where countries can express and articulate the actual needs for transitioning and then get funded for that, including the carbon pricing. I agree with that. The problem with projects like GETP, for example, is still loans. So countries need to take loans to implement them, and if they're not viable, it's not very tempting. Even if it's a good target, but it's going to be also expensive. So what the UN can do also is to find forms for cooperation that gives trust and also enables for shared benefit. So that you can have carbon finance from developed countries, but you can also have shared profits from wheeling agreements or shared profit from other market solutions that can help the transition. And for example, for getting rid of coal power plants in Asia, I think this is an universal challenge. We understand the affair, we understand the PPAs are there. There should be a way of solving it.
Thank you. Sira?
So, Minoru, your question was what do we expect the global stocktake to deliver? And I think we can learn from past. I have really found the global roadmap to accelerate SDG 7 that came out of the high-level dialogue that the Secretary General put in place. I have really found that to be a game changer. Why was it a game changer? Because it presented a common vision. It was an inclusive and comprehensive process. You have different stakeholders that were involved, and all that was consolidated into a common vision as to where we need to go. So I think maybe revisiting that, there were a number of priorities, revisiting that roadmap that presents a common vision as to where do we go from the end of the decade of sustainable energy for all, which is 2024, until 2030 and beyond, I think would be is something that should be delivered. I do think this needs to be a political commitment as well, and be very strongly backed by member states, particularly from our developing, both developed and developing countries. I do think there needs to be a call for action as well. I think we need to be ambitious and continue to emphasize on the ambition and the boldness. So I think the call for action can capture that. And in that, I think already a lot has been said. Let's look at what is being left behind. Clean cooking, we've mentioned. We need to have a new vision for clean cooking. At the SDG summit, UN Energy, UN DESA, the World Bank and WHO put on the table a roadmap towards clean cooking for all. And what I liked about this is that it really put this as a universal achievement. It's not just for developing countries, it's also an issue. We're also talking about transitions that have to take place in the global north, transitioning from gas to more sustainable forms of energy. It also looked at different types of financing that needs to come in, so giving new visions. Just building on what our esteemed speaker from Pakistan had said about financial flows. Fatih Birol, the executive director of IEA, was on BBC yesterday on Hard Talk saying only 2.5% of climate financing is going to clean energy in developing countries. That has to change, and I think our esteemed speaker had already said that. So we're really looking for this stocktake to be real and say what are going to be the new pathways. And I think a lot of discussion from our G77 is going to be on that and positioning that we have to be need-based and go beyond the 100 billion goal. But let me conclude. I am a civil society representative on this panel, and for us what's really going to be key is having a people-centered approach. And again, this links to what I said earlier on, is how does this deliver for lives and livelihoods? How is the energy transition going to deliver for jobs? In Africa, particularly for young people, is something that I think we need to get tangible and real. We can be talking about the billions of investments, but at the end of the day, people want to know what does this mean in representing a job for the 70% of youth that are in Africa. How is it going to deliver for turning gender inequalities that we see, the lack of energy access, women are more disproportionately impacted. How are we going to see in delivering on that? So taking a much more people-centered approach much is that. And I fully agree with earlier speakers that we have to go beyond 2030 to look also towards 2050. Thank you.
Thank you very much. One thing that I came out, that I also be in this sort of supporting role for the intergovernmental processes almost like 20 years now. And it seems to me also that in the area of energy, intergovernmental process could deliver more explicit action. This is my general sense. Then that it might take some time, but then as Hompe mentioned, that when they are united, they could give a guidance strong enough to trigger some actions at the country level. And I think some of the big picture ideas that the ambassador already mentioned and the vice minister also pointed toward do require some member states' united guidance in my mind. And I think this is the kind of thing that we expect from global stock taking. Before I come to the closing, I wonder whether the ambassador and the vice minister have any final word would like to share for a minute or so for guidance.
Thank you. I'm as a member of National Energy Councils. I think the guidance from the United Nations is really needed, because one thing that I learned about the global compacts and also the energy compacts, it gave tools, for the country, to fulfill it. So at least when we do some benchmark with the other country with the same parameter and framework, that is quite helpful. And also another tool that has been promoted lately is about science-based technology. Initiative is also one of the tools that could help, for a country like Indonesia, for instance. So when we stand up and we are saying that we are on that level, so there is a norm that we refer to.
Thank you very much, Ambassador.
Thank you, and thank you to all our panelists as such. I want to make just 2 points in conclusion. Firstly, we all know that the SDGs are integrated. There are 17 SDGs, so you cannot separate SDG 7 from the rest of the SDGs. And for developing countries, the important SDGs are SDGs 1 and 2, at least for the lower income countries and so forth. So we have to have a strategy which is integrated as well, as such. Next year you will have the stock take on SDG 7, but we will also have a stock take on all the SDGs. And I think that they are both very important and we have to evaluate both. Secondly, I want to say a word about finance. Financing is key. Without finance, we're not getting it. Whether we are rich countries, middle income, low income countries, without finance we can't. We have to mobilize the finance. The proposition that the developing countries will be able to mobilize private finance to turn the billions into trillions, I think it is a fallacy. Infrastructure, energy, and other infrastructure is financed 83% from public finance historically as such, still today. So the developing countries, if they are going to reach that 1.5 trillion in a transitional infrastructure, energy and so forth, it has to be mobilized publicly. And we have the route, we have the modalities of how this is going to be mobilized. When the COVID pandemic happened, $17 trillion were mobilized by the developed countries to inject into their economies, but less than $1 trillion for the developing countries. So we have to use the same tools that the industrial countries have used for their economic survival, for the development and a just transition to a green economy by the developing country. And we know what the tools are. We've agreed on those tools in the political declaration of the SDG summit, but we have binding commitments on climate under the UNCCC. We do not have binding commitments on SDGs. And one of the objectives of the developing countries and of the world should be to make them both binding. Binding, and that is the way we will have a fair transition.
Thank you very much. I think we have got the clear guidance and the clear sort of discussion on those things. Let me say that, toward next year, at the United Nations Secretariat, we will be fully ready to support the President of the General Assembly and the member states' effort to discuss further on these issues. There will be a series of preparatory processes that the President of the General Assembly will be launching toward global stocktaking of SDG 7. And then I anticipate that there will be some form of outcome, like call for action, like Sheila mentioned, complemented by a series of voluntary commitments and action. Energy Compact, thank you very much for the government of Indonesia to standing up on the Energy Compact as well. It's going to be one of the means to do that. We raised already $1.3 trillion of Energy Compact so far, but not at all sufficient. Not at all. So we need to go double, triple, but making sure those actually result in tangible actions on the ground, because otherwise it flows on paper, but then never happened on the ground. And I think this is where UN system and the international community needs to come together to support governments, support partners on the ground to make sure this happens. So we have a lot of sort of, all the work to be done. But we also got the great big ideas. So I personally have got some ideas as to what to do on the call for action and then supporting member states. But thank you so much for everybody joining together and looking forward to working together. Thank you very much.